Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever found yourself studying music theory and, you hit that wall right around intervals, or maybe you're a composer and you just want to make sure that foundation is rock solid, you are in exactly the right place.
Today, we are really going to dig into the architecture of musical sound itself, intervals, and the half steps that actually build them. We're pulling all of this straight from the advanced theory syllabus.
This is the stuff that takes you from being an intermediate musician to, well, someone with real compositional understanding.
It is.
And that's right. This isn't just about memorizing definitions. This is about fluency. Our whole mission today is to streamline the steps you need to master interval construction. Because really, it's the thing you just can't skip if you want to understand harmony or chords later on.
Absolutely. Think of it like this. We need to nail down a precise system of measurement. If you can accurately measure the distance between any two notes, the entire world of Western harmony just, it opens up for you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the absolute basics. When we talk about musical distance, what exactly is an interval?
It's simply the distance between two notes. But in theory, we define that distance with two critical parts. Its quality and its number.
The number seems like the easier place to start. We're talking about things like seconds, thirds, fifths, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And to figure out the number, you have to count everything on the staff between the two notes. And this is the part people sometimes forget. You have to include the bottom note and the top note.
Ah, so you're counting the lines and spaces.
The lines and spaces. If you start on a line, you count that line, then the space above, then the next line. It's almost geometric.
So if I'm on a C and I go up to an F, I count C as 1, D is 2, E is 3, and F is 4. So that makes it some kind of a fourth.
It's a fourth. The number just gives you the span.
And that number stays the same no matter what, right? Even with sharps or flats.
Correct.
Yeah.
C to F sharp is still a fourth. C to F flat is also a fourth. The number doesn't change, only the quality does.
Okay, speaking of quality, the syllabus splits these into a couple of categories. Let's start with the basic ones, the diatonic qualities.
Right, so the primary rule is this. If the top note of an interval is naturally in the major scale of the bottom note, that tells you its starting quality.
Okay.
So if the interval is a second, a third, a sixth, or a seventh, it's automatically called major.
And the others?
If it's a fourth, a fifth, or an eighth an octave, it's called perfect. These are our baselines, our starting measurements.
So that distinction, major versus perfect, that feels like just foundational memorization. But this is where it gets really interesting and frankly where it gets hard. Moving away from that basic scale to create the altered qualities.
Minor, augmented, and diminished.
Yes. And the definitions for these are so precise, they tell you exactly how to modify that top note.
They do. And to build any of these, you have to mentally construct the major or perfect version first. You always start there.
Let's take augmented and minor first. Their rules seem a little more straightforward.
Okay, so an augmented interval always comes from a major or a perfect interval, and you're just making it bigger. The rule is simple. You raise the top note by 1/2 step.
So a perfect fourth, like our C to F example.
Right. C to F, raise that F to an F sharp, and now you have an augmented fourth.
Simple enough. And what about its opposite, the minor interval?
Minor intervals only come from major intervals. So your
Yeah.
seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. Take a major third, C to E. To make it minor, you just make it smaller by lowering that E a half step to E flat.
C to E flat, a minor third. It's a simple derivation.
Exactly. But now we get to the one that can be a bit conceptually tricky for students, the diminished interval.
Yeah, the definition in the source material seems a little complicated. It gives two different ways to create one.
Right, and it can seem confusing, but there's a good reason for it. The goal is always precision and a logical connection back to that major or perfect baseline.
Okay, so walk us through it.
So, rule 1. If you start with a perfect interval, a fourth, fifth, or eighth, you make it diminished by lowering the top note a half step, just one. A perfect fifth, C to G, becomes a diminished fifth, C to G flat.
That makes sense. It's symmetrical with how augmented works.
It is. But now for rule 2. If you start with a major interval, a second, third, sixth, or seventh, you have to lower the top note a whole step to make it diminished.
Wait a second. That's the part. If I take a major third, C to E, and lower it a half step, I get a minor third, C to E flat. Why does the definition skip over that and say I have to lower it a whole step to C to E double flat to get a diminished third?
That is the perfect question. It gets to the heart of what we call theoretical derivation. The definition insists on that whole step because it maintains a clean hierarchy.
A hierarchy.
Yes. Minor already exists as a quality that's one half step down from major. So for diminished to be its own distinct thing, it has to be derived by going 2 half steps down from major. It can't just be a half step down from minor.
So you're always referring back to the major.
Always.
So if I'm building, say, a diminished seventh above the note D, I first have to think of the major seventh.
Which would be D to C sharp.
D to C sharp, right. So to make that diminished, I have to lower that C sharp a whole step.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And a whole step below C sharp is not C natural, it's C flat.
Ah, C flat. So D to C flat is the correctly written diminished seventh.
And that rule guarantees you skip over the minor version in between. It maintains that logical relationship to the major scale.
Wow. It's fascinating how the naming system demands that kind of theoretical purity, regardless of what it sounds like. And that actually brings us perfectly to the building blocks themselves, the half step. Because all these alterations are built on half steps, but as the material points out, not all half steps are, well, created equal in music theory.
Not at all. And we have to distinguish between the two types because how you spell the interval on the page dictates its theoretical job.
Okay, let's define them. First up, the diatonic half step.
A diatonic half step is any half step that uses 2 different letter names. Think B up to C or maybe F sharp up to G. You're moving from one scale degree to the next.
And the other one, the chromatic half step.
That's any half step that's written using the same letter name. This is movement within a pitch. So C to C sharp, or maybe A flat up to A natural, you're altering the note you're on.
But why does this distinction matter so much? I mean, on a piano, C sharp and D flat are the same key. They sound identical. They're enharmonically equivalent.
It matters entirely for spelling and for function. Think about the most famous enharmonic pair in all of music theory.
The tritone.
The tritone.
Yeah.
The augmented fourth versus the diminished fifth. They sound exactly the same, but they behave in completely different ways in a chord progression.
Okay, walk us through that. If I start on C and I want an augmented fourth, what's my process?
Okay, first, the number. C up to F is a fourth, we know that.
Right.
Second, the quality. To make a perfect fourth augment, we raise the top note a half step, so F becomes F sharp. The interval is C to F sharp.
Got it. Now, what if I want the diminished fifth, also starting from C?
Okay, first, number. C up to G is a fifth. Second, quality. To make a perfect fifth diminished, we lower the top note a half step, so G becomes G flat, C to G flat.
So C to F sharp is an augmented fourth, and C to G flat is a diminished fifth. They sound identical, but they're spelled differently, which means F sharp and G flat, even though they're the same key on the piano, have totally different theoretical jobs.
Exactly right. In classical harmony, that augmented fourth wants to resolve outward. The diminished fifth wants to resolve inward. The composer's choice of spelling is a signal. It tells you their harmonic intent. It tells you where that sound is supposed to go next.
And that's why we have to be so meticulous with the rules for diatonic versus chromatic spelling.
That's why it matters.
This contest is so important, especially because the source material even says, and I'm quoting here, scholarly theory texts are divided concerning the definition of diatonic and chromatic half steps.
They are. But for this framework, the definition we're using, different letter names versus the same letter name, is the working rule. We need a consistent functional language.
Okay, so this brings us to the final step, the culmination. We've done the number, the 5 qualities, the 2 types of half steps. What does this all mean for the musician who just needs to write a specific interval correctly on the page?
This is mastery. It requires a 3-part process that pulls together everything we've talked about. Let's try one. A tough one. Write a diminished seventh above the note E flat.
Okay, starting on E flat, step 1, the number.
We count up 7 letters from E. So E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Our target note has to be some kind of D.
E flat to some D is a seventh.
Okay.
Step 2, find the major baseline. What is the major seventh above E flat?
Well, the major seventh is always a half step below the octaves. The octave is E flat. A half step below E flat is D natural.
So E flat to D natural is a major seventh.
Correct.
And now step 3, apply the alteration rule for diminished. And since a seventh is a major interval, we have to use the whole step rule.
Right. We have to lower that D natural by a whole step.
So D natural down a half step is D flat, and down another half step is D double flat.
D double flat. That's it. So the top note must be spelled as D double flat.
The final answer is E flat up to D double flat. It uses the correct letter names, E to D, for a seventh, and that D double flat spells the diminished quality correctly.
And that ability to run through that logical process number, quality baseline, precise spelling adjustment, that is the difference between just knowing what an interval is and truly mastering them.
It's total coordination. You're calculating the distance, you're adjusting based on the scale,
Yeah.
and then using the correct spelling to define the relationship.
It's the moment when that abstract idea of distance becomes a concrete, usable part of musical language.
Well, that brings us to the end of this incredibly dense deep dive. Let's do a quick recap of the key takeaways for you. Intervals are distance, and they're named by number and quality.
In those five qualities, especially minor, augmented, and diminished, you have to follow the rules of derivation. You always start from the major or perfect version.
And remember, the distinction between diatonic half steps with different letter names and chromatic half steps with the same letter name, it is not just academic.
Not at all. That spelling is the core difference between an augmented fourth and a diminished fifth. It tells you what the interval is doing.
And this whole system is the foundation for almost everything advanced that comes later. I mean, whether it's seventh chords or even 20th century chordal harmony, it all comes back to being able to define that original distance between two notes.
It does. So here's a final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. If a composer writes a melody that moves from C to the pitch C sharp, they've written an augmented unison.
Okay.
If they write that same sound, but as C to D flat, they've written a minor second. They sound identical. So how does that choice of spelling unison versus second change how that note functions? How does it reflect the composer's harmonic or even dramatic intent?
It makes the notation just as expressive as the sound itself. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the fundamentals of musical distance.
We hope this clarity serves you well in your theoretical studies.
We'll catch you next time.